All right, welcome to Scenes from a Non-Existent Book. I am Corey Kerr, and I am reading one chapter at a time of a book that I am writing as I write it. I'm going to try to get to maybe a chapter a week, but you can check this out at coreykerr.com/email, which will take you to my Substack, or go to my YouTube channel and click on the podcast tab, and that'll get you there. This is Louis John, Idiot and God of Time. Fortunately, there was one man who had the ability to fix everything. Unfortunately, that man was an idiot. Louis John was shot in the eye with a pellet gun when he was 10 years old. Miraculously, Lou didn't go blind in that eye. In fact, other than the small cut in his eyelid at the entry point and a minor headache, Lou didn't notice any lasting effects until 17 years later. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Lou and his cousin were playing in his backyard with their pellet guns, shooting soda cans off of the fence. The cans just kind of fell over. The duo became bored and started to change the rules of the game. They tried tossing the cans in the air and shooting them. They slightly changed direction when hit. The milk jugs full of water failed to give them the giant Hollywood blockbuster explosions they were expecting. Most things they tried were a little underwhelming. The neighborhood cats had learned to avoid the boys long ago, and fear of their dad's swift retribution kept them from shooting at the windows of the house. Slowly, an image of an old painting formed in their minds, a depiction of a man with a crossbow aiming at a boy with an apple balanced on his head. Having been raised more like brothers than distant cousins, neither boy questioned the coincidence of both of them having the same terrible idea at the same time. They looked at each other and smiled as they said, "William Tell!" Lou ran outside to get an apple, and his cousin began the laborious process of pumping up the air gun in his pellet gun. Neither boy knew the significance of the legend of William Tell's defiance to bow to tyranny, or his subsequent stay of execution due to his excellent marksmanship. In fact, neither even knew why they knew the name at all. It would be difficult for them not to know about William Tell, as he had become part of the cultural landscape, appearing in the Looney Tunes, Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield, Peanuts, The Far Side, The Addams Family, James Bond, and was even depicted offstage on The Muppet Show while Alice Cooper tries to get Kermit to sell his soul to the devil. Regardless of where the boys originally got the idea, Lou had returned with the apple and put it on his head while his cousin took aim. But Louis John had a plan, and, as we have previously mentioned, Lou was an idiot. His cousin was a better shot than he was, and thinking that it would be funny to watch his cousin's reaction when he missed, Lou jumped at the last moment. Thus, the pellet destined to strike the apple entered the top of Lou's eye socket instead. Lou crumpled to the ground, holding his face in his hands, blood trickling through his fingers, while his cousin chucked his gun over the fence and ran, convinced that he was going to prison for murder. Now, we could discuss the path of the pellet in medical terms. If this book had a different author, they might describe whether the pellet passed through the greater wing of the sphenoid bone or the superior orbital fissure. But you're stuck with me, so it's really only important to note that the pellet somehow passed above Louis's eye and through the back of his eye socket, lodging itself near the part of the brain involved in the perception of time. Whether this was the cerebral cortex or the suprachiasmatic nucleus is largely irrelevant, because 10-year-old Lou was fine. This minor disruption of his brain gave him a singular ability that only manifested itself years later when the timekeeper's strike caused a reduction of dark matter, reducing the amount of the present particle, and everyone began randomly slipping forward or backward in time. But Lou's slips were not random. Lou could control when he slipped. Our perception of time is based on our limited ability to be present in the moment, remember the past, and anticipate the future. In fact, the future isn't real in the same sense that the past is real. It is real in that there are, at any given moment, an infinite number of possibilities. But once time rolls into the present, it becomes fact, as a specific fixed number of variables occurred. As we perceive them, they become the past. So the past and the present are real, while the future is infinitely possible until it is finitely experienced in the present. Louis John began to see people around him slipping in time. His friends and family would suddenly age or get younger. After that hot news lady Jessica Wawa decapitated her zombified co-host Walter Klenner on TV, he watched his coworkers begin to habitually slap or punch each other when they slipped. He saw babies on construction sites and old people at the club, momentarily, until people near them smacked them back into the present. Late one night, he was mindlessly scrolling through thumbnails on Netflix when the preview of a documentary on looping played. Lou slipped for the first time. He rapidly aged and remembered watching the entire documentary. More importantly, he felt a certain control, like someone noticing after a few moments that they had been holding their breath. He sort of decided to slip back to the present, much like you'd decide to start breathing again. For Lou, being in his present age was like breathing. He just did it when he wasn't thinking about it. But when he did think about it, he could change how fast or slow he was breathing or experiencing time. For some reason, he never slipped younger than his present age, but he could intentionally slip older and then slip back to the present. He found that he could decide to watch a movie, slip forward a couple of hours to remember watching the movie, and then slip back to his present age. In his present age, he retained the memory of watching that movie in the future. The memory of that possible future was now in his past. He didn't actually enjoy watching the movie, but he remembered enjoying watching it, which was almost as good, especially because he was able to watch or remember watching 23 movies that night and still get 8 hours of sleep. Each time he decided to do something, then he slipped forward and back, and he remembered what it was like to have done that thing. And so, a freak William Tell pellet gun accident created a loop-hacking god of time named Louis John, and he spent the first few weeks of his near-infinite temporal power watching more TV and movies in a month than there is time to watch in 10 years. He got incredibly bored, kind of lonely, and felt a bit empty. He ate a microwave burrito and continued to feel empty. So he went back and watched that documentary on the scientific community's use of loop hacking. He actually watched it in real time. The documentary was about a small group of scientists using the random and accidental slipping of their colleagues to report the future results of their current research. They went about their day to cure some long Latin-sounding thing, and when one of them would slip forward, they would ask him if their current testing was on the right track or not. If the older version of their colleague remembered the test failing, they would abandon that line of testing for another hypothesis. This was the important part. The future would change. Through a series of interviews of their future selves, they were able to get 15 years of research done in 2 years, and they solved whatever fancy thing they were trying to do. Lou found it hard to focus much because an idea was forming in his mind. They had to wait for these slips to happen randomly and had no control over how far forward they slipped. He, on the other hand, could slip forward and back at will. He realized that he could have a significant impact testing out possible futures. Literally, with a little methodical effort, he could know the outcome of any of his actions. This was world-changing, and he had been wasting it on TV. So he set out to pick up girls. This was technically world-changing because it would change his world, but, as previously mentioned, Lou was an idiot. So, while he had the capacity to alter the course of human history, end wars, solve world hunger, or fix time itself by testing out various options and choosing the best future, he tried to get laid instead. Lou went to the grocery store. He had seen a lot of women there before and figured it was as good a place as any. He quickly found that he had to fully commit to a decision while he's in the present. This was crucial. Then he'd slip forward in time to remember the results and slip back to the present with his new knowledge of the future. If that future was desirable, he'd let things play out. If he remembered a future that he didn't like, he'd slip back to the present and change his mind, fully committing to a different action and thus causing the future to change. Then he'd slip forward again to check the results. He felt like he was guaranteed to score. He completely struck out. In hundreds of possible futures, he was shot down, ignored, slapped, laughed at, and escorted out of the store. He discovered this in the time it would have taken him to microwave 6 burritos. To everyone else, there was a man standing in the middle of the aisle, staring at women while he violently shook, cursed, vibrated, took a deep breath, vibrated, punched his hand, vibrated, muttered to himself, vibrated, and so on. He remembered 144 hours of rejection in the 12 minutes that he stood there shaking in the frozen food aisle. And while he technically had the option of trying every possible approach to pick up a girl, there were 2 major limiting factors. First, there is only so much rejection that a man can take, even if that man has godlike powers over the space-time continuum. Second, he was an idiot, and was limited by his own imagination. Unfortunately for our would-be hero, he couldn't imagine a world where women were people. He had approached each woman as he had seen them approached in the rom-coms, action flicks, sitcoms, and epic fantasies he had binged over the last month. In short, he approached each of them like poorly written one-dimensional plot devices. As you can imagine, This did not work. Well, this intentional loop hacking didn't work in love, or lust in this case. It works great with gambling. In fact, Lou doesn't even need to hit up Vegas to gamble. He just slips around a bit, buys and sells a few stocks, crypto, and exchanges foreign currency. This takes him roughly 30 to 45 minutes a week and keeps him significantly flush with cash. Now he is extremely rich. This does work as an approach to women, a specific type of woman, the type of woman that is happy to be a plot device as long as she never needs to go to the grocery store herself. He quit his job and spends his days burning through an unending amount of money surrounded by sycophants, lackeys, and vapid social media models. He thinks that this is the life. He is an idiot that could have saved us all, but will end up a horribly disfigured mute in the near future. But that is for another chapter. For now, Louis John is living the life depicted by someone trying to sell you a motivational self-help book, except he owns the mansions, cars, and private jet instead of renting them a few minutes before the cameras started rolling. So that is that chapter. We will revisit Lou. I've got a little bit of foreshadowing there on how he becomes a horribly disfigured mute, but we will jump back into Lou's future in the future of this story. And if you want to follow along with this or catch up on it, if some of this didn't make sense, you got to go listen to, or watch the other chapters. And you can do that at coreykerr.com/email, which will take you to my Substack, or you can go to my YouTube channel and you can click on the podcast tab, which will take you to these things I'm doing. I think I called it Scenes from a Non-Existent Book because I'm building it as I go. So if you enjoyed this, leave a comment. Hopefully this is a bit of a cleanser from the last one, which is a bit horrifying. Anyway, go make stuff.